In 1857, on Mississippi cotton plantations, a 10-year-old boy held in bondage did the unforgivable. He stole an egg to quiet the ache in his stomach. The master, white-hot with rage, hauled him into the woods, away from any witnesses, to a place where cries went unheard. What the master failed to realize was that those woods had watchers. Yellow-eyed watchers. And the one behind those eyes owed everything to the boy now bound to that tree. The instant the lash tore through the air, the whole forest stirred. This is Samuel's tale, the boy who aided a wolf, and the day cruelty met something no man can tame. Mississippi, 1857. Cotton was worth more than blood. Plantations sprawled for leagues, fields white beneath an unmerciful sun, worked by black hands that never knew rest. Among those hands was Samuel, 10 years old, slight as a twig, with hollowed eyes holding more hunger than hope. Samuel had never tasted freedom. He belonged to Thornhill Plantation, the property of Master Edward Thornhill, a man whose power was measured by how thoroughly he crushed spirits. To Thornhill, slaves were assets. They were to labor, obey, and most of all, fear. Any misstep, however minor, demanded punishment, not for justice, but for principle. The egg wasn't about what it cost. It was about ensuring nobody forgot their place. Samuel's mother perished when he was 5, her body spent in those cotton fields beneath a pitiless sun. His father, sold south before Samuel drew his first breath. The boy was raised by women not bound to him by blood, hands roughened by labor, doing the impossible to keep the children alive while barely clinging to life themselves. Hunger was his oldest companion. Not the passing pang of a skipped meal, but the kind that burrows into your stomach and eats away from the inside, day stacked upon day. The thin gruel at dawn barely lasted till noon. The stale bread at dusk had to stretch until morning. Samuel had long ago learned to swallow his complaints. Complaints drew the lash, and hunger made every blow land twice as hard. Yet there was one sliver of day when Samuel breathed differently. A chore others dodged, but for him came as near to mercy as anything he knew, gathering firewood at the forest's edge. The overseers kept their distance from those thick woods bordering the plantation. They whispered of rattlers thick as a man's arm, panthers that stalked without sound, and the spirits of runaways who had perished trying to cross the swamp. So they always sent the same boy. After all, if Samuel met misfortune there, that was one less mouth to fill. Samuel would hoist his worn burlap sack and travel alone the thin path dividing the realm of men from the dominion of trees. Away from the overseer's roar and the leather's crack, he could steal minutes pretending to be free. He could tilt his head and glimpse the sky through the branches, hear birdsong that answered to no one, breathe the damp earth that had never known chains. The white men feared those woods. For Samuel, it was his only place to draw breath. The bell would rouse him before sunrise, not from desire, but because hunger would not grant him sleep. His stomach would clench, growl, ache, a hollowness that seemed to pull everything out of him. He'd lie on the packed dirt floor of the quarters, eyes on the thatch above, waiting for the inevitable summons to another day. 3 chimes from the bell, cleaving the pre-dawn darkness. Samuel rose with the others, a shadow gliding among shadows. Women kindled the cooking fire. The youngest whimpered, from hunger, from cold, no one could distinguish any more. Breakfast never varied. Thin cornmeal mush, saltless, tasteless. 1 ladle per person. Samuel sipped slowly, spinning out the moment, trying to outwheat his stomach. It never worked. Within half an hour, the emptiness crept back as though he had not eaten at all. In the fields, work started with first light. Samuel was too young for picking cotton, so they set him to hauling water, cleaning tools, pulling weeds. Children's work, they called it, as if children did not tire, did not sweat, did not feel the burn in their backs. Yet each day, around mid-morning, Overseer Sullivan would call his name. Samuel. Firewood. Go. The command was simple, but it carried a secret reprieve. Samuel would take his worn sack and walk the trail alone. That was what mattered. Alone meant no lash across his back. No eyes tracking his every move. No need to drop his gaze when a white person passed. The trail began where the cotton ended. On one side, row after endless row of white bowls. On the other, the dense green wall of the forest, a sharp seam separating two worlds. Samuel would always pause at that boundary, as though gathering courage to cross. Then he would breathe deep and step inside. The forest was another realm entirely. Damp, dim, teeming with sounds Samuel could not name. Twigs snapped, leaves murmured. Something perpetually rustled in the undergrowth. The white men claimed danger lurked there. Samuel understood that the true danger was behind him, in the fields, in the big house, in the men whose hands held whips and chains. He gathered dry twigs, fallen limbs, fuel for the cookfire. He worked unhurried, stretching each minute. Every moment there was one moment free of screams, free of fear's weight. Sometimes Samuel would rest against a trunk, close his eyes, just listen. Wind threading through leaves, distant water, birdsong that asked no permission. There, in those stolen instants, Samuel forgot he belonged to someone else. But hunger never forgot him. It was a September afternoon when Samuel first saw the eyes. The day was thick, pressed down by damp heat that clung to skin. Samuel had half filled his sack and was resting against an old oak, its roots thick as buried fingers. He studied his own hands, small, scarred, too calloused for 10 years, when he felt it. Someone was watching. Not a suspicion. A certainty. That primal knowledge seated deeper than thought. An alarm every living creature carries within. Samuel went still. He did not turn his head. He did not make a sound. He simply let his gaze drift until he found them. Between two dark trunks, 20 paces off, a pair of yellow eyes glowed in the half-light. Not snake's eyes. Not wildcat's eyes. Large, round, unwavering, and fixed on him. Samuel's heart hammered. He knew the stories. Panthers. Wolves. Bears. Things that killed in seconds. Running would trigger pursuit. So he held motionless, praying silently behind unmoving lips, asking God that the creature was not hungry. Before we continue this gripping account, subscribe to the channel and write "freedom" in the comments so I know who you are. Thank you. Now, let us proceed. Slowly, the creature advanced a step. Samuel saw the snout first. Then the dark fur, matted, smeared with mud and dried blood. The animal was enormous, larger than any dog Samuel had ever laid eyes on. A wolf, immense, its frame gaunt beneath its size, ribs pressing against hide, one forepaw dragging slightly. The wolf was wounded and starved as Samuel. For stretched seconds, boy and beast regarded each other in stillness. Samuel breathed shallow, restraining his movements. The wolf simply watched with those yellow eyes that seemed to perceive more than was natural. No anger lived in that gaze, nor hunger. Only exhaustion. Pain. Aloneness. Samuel recognized it. He carried the same. Then, unhurried, the wolf turned and slipped among the trees, soundless, as if it had never been there at all. Samuel stood frozen another 5 minutes, waiting for his pulse to settle. When he could finally move, he seized his sack and fled back to the plantation. But the whole way, and through the entire night, all he saw when he closed his eyes were those yellow eyes. And something inside him, something he could not name, knew he would see them again. Samuel kept the wolf to himself. He understood that if he spoke, white men would arrive with guns and hounds. They would shoot the animal for sport, mount its head as a prize. And that, Samuel could not articulate why, felt profoundly wrong. Yet the wolf would not leave his thoughts. Its thinness. Its wounds. Its eyes. At night, while the quarters slept, Samuel lay wakeful. The wolf was alone, like him. The wolf was injured, like him. The wolf was hungry, like him. The next morning, Samuel took a chance. While the others ate, he slipped a piece of his own bread inside his shirt. It was meager, a lump of hard, stale flour, but it was his. Hoarding food was forbidden. Discovery would earn him a beating. Samuel hid it anyway. When he was sent for firewood, he went straight to the oak with the thick roots. He halted there, heart pounding, and waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Nothing. Samuel inhaled and did something that felt mad even to himself. He drew out the bread, set it on the ground in plain view, and retreated slowly. Then he settled on a root 10 paces away, and was still. The wait stretched so long that Samuel began to think he had been foolish, that the wolf would not come, that he had wasted his bread for nothing. He was on the verge of surrender when he caught the soft fall of paws upon leaves. The wolf emerged from cover, wary, tasting the air. It spotted Samuel, halted, kept watching. Samuel did not move. Did not meet its gaze directly. He had heard that was a challenge. He simply remained quiet, breathing slow. The wolf took another step. Then another. It reached the bread, sniffed, glanced once more at Samuel. Then, in a swift motion, it snatched the morsel and retreated a few paces to eat. It was not enough to quiet the hunger of such a creature, yet Samuel thought he saw thanks in those yellow eyes. "You're alone, aren't you?" Samuel spoke low, more to himself than the wolf. "Like me." The wolf did not answer, of course. But neither did it leave. It kept its distance, kept watching. And Samuel, for the first time in ages, did not feel entirely solitary. The days that followed fell into pattern. Samuel saved scraps, a crust of bread, a potato skin, once even a piece of pork fat discarded from the big house kitchen. He concealed each prize within his shirt, risking the lash every time. At the forest, he laid the offerings in the accustomed spot. The wolf always came, always ate. And slowly, the space between them shrank. Samuel began to murmur to it, unbidden words he spoke to no one else. He spoke of the hunger that would not release him. Of the mother whose face had faded. Of the fear lodged permanently in his throat. The wolf listened, reclined among the roots, those yellow eyes fixed on the boy. It did not comprehend language, but it grasped tone. It recognized another being who also carried pain. Fear did not vanish, but it transformed into something else. Respect. Samuel respected the wolf for what it was, untamed, unbound, bowing to no authority. And the wolf, in some manner, seemed to return that respect. It was on an October afternoon that everything shifted. Samuel had wandered deeper that day, seeking drier branches. He was far from the accustomed oak when he caught a sound, low, pained. Not a growl. A whimper. He followed it, his chest tightening. He pushed through heavy brush, skirted roots that seemed to grasp at him, until he reached a small clearing. There lay the wolf, its hind leg clamped in an iron trap. One of those devices white men set for foxes and coyotes. The metal teeth had sunk deep. Blood darkened the fur and the earth around it. The wolf had been struggling, pulling, whimpering, but each movement drove the trap deeper. When it saw Samuel, it ceased. Those yellow eyes locked on the boy, filled with agony and something like appeal. Or perhaps Samuel only wished to believe that. He knew he should leave. Should gather his wood, return to the plantation, pretend he had witnessed nothing. A trapped wolf was the white man's affair, not his. If anyone discovered he had aided the beast, it would be judged sabotage. The punishment would be severe. Yet Samuel looked into those eyes. Saw the pain. Saw the desperation. Saw himself, caught, bleeding, whimpering, waiting for someone who never came. "I'm going to get you out," he said softly. "But you cannot bite me. Do you hear? Please. Do not bite." Samuel approached on his knees, hands extended, empty. The wolf did not growl. It only watched, body rigid, breath labored. Samuel could smell the blood, could see the muscles coiled for attack. He kept coming. He reached the trap. It was rusted but strong. The teeth had pierced the wolf's paw, fur, flesh, all. Samuel gripped both sides and pulled. It would not budge. He strained harder, throwing his whole weight into it. Nothing. The wolf whimpered. Samuel felt heat behind his eyes. "I know this hurts," he whispered. "I know. But I need to force it." He gripped again, bracing his foot against the trap's base. He hauled with every shred of strength. His arms screamed. His hands slipped on the blood-slicked metal. The trap groaned, gave a finger's width, then another. Samuel cried out with effort. His palms bled where the iron cut. He did not release. He pulled, kept pulling, until the trap gaped wide enough. The wolf yanked its leg free in one frantic motion. Samuel collapsed backward, hands aflame, chest heaving. The trap struck the ground with a hollow clang. The wolf limped several steps, its hind leg barely reaching the dirt, still bleeding. Then it halted. Turned its head. Fixed Samuel with a long, penetrating look, as though etching this instant, this face, this scent, into memory. As though marking a debt that lacked words to name it, yet both comprehended perfectly. Then the wolf melted into the trees, limping but alive. Samuel sat there a long while, studying his own bleeding hands, the fallen trap, the smear of blood across the leaves. He understood he had done something significant. Something that had altered what lay between him and that animal. There, in that moment, a silent covenant was struck. And debts, Samuel would soon learn, are always repaid. The weeks that followed were the strangest Samuel had ever lived. The wolf vanished after the rescue. Samuel went for wood each day, always leaving food at the usual spot. But the wolf did not come. He began to dread the worst, that the wounds were too grave, that the wolf had perished in some hidden hollow of the woods. Then, on a chill November morning, Samuel arrived at the oak and found the wolf there. Not concealed among the trees. Not at a wary distance. It lay near the roots, waiting. The paw was still healing, but bore weight now. The fur had been cleaned, licked clean, likely, and the yellow eyes shone with something altered. Samuel halted, uncertain. The wolf lifted its head, met his gaze, and for the first time, the air between them held no tension. No fear. "You came back," Samuel breathed, a faint smile forming on his hollow face. I thought you might have." He moved slowly, placed his offering on the ground. This time, the wolf did not wait. It approached while Samuel was still near, ate without retreating. Samuel lowered himself against the oak, a respectful gap between them, and the two remained there. Thus began the most unlikely friendship that Mississippi forest had ever witnessed. Samuel never attempted to touch the wolf. Never drew too near. Never startled it. It was not a domestic dog. Not a pet. It was a wolf, wild, dangerous, untethered. And Samuel honored that. He honored it because he recognized that he, too, was not what the white men intended him to be. He, too, carried something inside that never fully bowed, even when his body was compelled to obey. They met every day. Samuel brought food when he could, stolen scraps, portions taken from his own meager allowance. The wolf was always there, waiting. And Samuel would talk. He spoke of everything. The constant dread. The ache in his back after endless hours spent in the fields. The shame of dropping his eyes whenever a white person passed, even white children younger than him. The ache for a mother whose face he could scarcely call to mind. The dreams he sometimes had, where he could run and never stop, and no one chased him. The wolf listened. It rested its head on its paws, gazed steady on Samuel, ears attuned to every word. It did not understand the language, but it understood anguish. It understood solitude. It understood what it was to be hunted simply for existing. They were two cast-offs, a boy no one recognized as human, and animal men slaughtered for sport. And there, in that forgotten pocket of forest, they were equals. Samuel knew the peril. If the white men discovered this, they would kill the wolf without hesitation, and likely punish Samuel for communing with a wild beast, or whatever pretext they concocted. So he was vigilant. He never lingered too long. Never mentioned the wolf to anyone. He guarded that secret the same way he hoarded food, hidden, protected, precious. Sometimes, on moonless nights, Samuel would gaze through a crack in the quarters toward the dark line of trees and picture the wolf there, unfettered among the trunks. And for a moment, he permitted himself to imagine that he, too, was free. That he could walk without chains, without dread, without begging leave to draw breath. The friendship with the wolf was the sole thing in Samuel's life that belonged wholly to him. The one choice he had made of his own will. The only bond in which he was not property or chattel. He was a friend. And that, Samuel would soon discover, was worth more than either of them could have foreseen. Winter arrived, and with it, sharper hunger. Rations shrank. Master Thornhill blamed market prices, but everyone recognized it for simple greed. The porridge grew thinner, the bread staler. Children wept more in the night, and adults grew quieter through the day. Samuel was desperate. The food he managed to reserve for the wolf was costing him his own survival. Yet each time he considered stopping, he saw those yellow eyes again. The paw caught in the trap. The moment when he had done something that counted. So he kept sharing, kept starving to feed his one friend. It happened on a frigid December morning. Samuel was passing near the chicken coop, a makeshift structure adjoining the big house kitchen, when he spotted it. The door stood ajar. Someone had neglected to latch it after gathering eggs for the master's breakfast. He halted. Glanced about. No one near. The overseers were in the fields. The cook was inside. A single second. One chance. Samuel's stomach gnawed as it never had before. 3 days since he had eaten more than scraps, reserving almost everything for the wolf. Dizziness swept over him in waves. At night, he dreamed of food. He woke with the flavor of nothing in his mouth. One egg. Just one. Surely nobody would miss it. The coop held so many. Samuel knew this was false. He knew that on Thornhill Plantation, everything was tallied, weighed, regulated. Eggs were counted each morning and each evening. One missing egg would be detected. But hunger overpowered fear. Or perhaps hunger and fear had fused into a single force that propelled Samuel through that doorway. He slipped inside. The chickens clucked, unsettled. In the corner, 3 fresh eggs, still warm. Samuel seized one, the smallest, as if that could lessen the crime. He tucked it against his skin, inside his shirt, where the egg's warmth merged with his own. He exited hastily, drew the door shut, scanned his surroundings once more. No one had observed. Or so he believed. Samuel waited until the firewood hour to consume the egg. He went to the oak, where the wolf already waited. And there, hands quaking from fear and want, he cracked the shell. The yolk spilled through his fingers. He ate deliberately, savoring every drop, feeling the food travel down his throat, quieting for a space that infinite emptiness. He divided it with the wolf. Half for each. The animal licked his fingers, something it had never done, and Samuel laughed, a strange noise he had almost forgotten he could make. For a few hours, he was joyful. For a few hours, the world receded. But the world does not forget. When Samuel returned to the plantation that afternoon, unusual commotion stirred the yard. Overseers clustered near the chicken coop. The cook, a plump white woman with a crimson face, was shrieking about thieving Negroes. Master Thornhill stood there, arms folded, expression rigid. Samuel felt his blood turn to ice. "Line everyone up," Thornhill commanded. Now. Overseers moved from cabin to cabin, dragging out every soul. Children, elders, pregnant women, all of them. They formed a line in the packed dirt yard. Samuel slipped among the others, trying to suppress the trembling in his legs. Master Thornhill paced the line, his boots thudding against the earth. He paused before each face, searching eyes, seeking guilt. "One egg," he said, his tone like a blade. "Someone stole an egg from my chicken coop." Silence. "This is not about the egg," he continued. "This is about respect. About knowing one's place. About understanding that on this plantation, I am the law, and anyone who breaks my law answers for it." He halted in front of Samuel. The boy tried to meet his gaze but could not. His eyes dropped. And in that instant, in that fraction of a heartbeat, Master Thornhill knew. "You," he said, low. "Look at me, boy." Samuel slowly raised his eyes. He saw fury on the master's face. He also saw something worse, gratification. The satisfaction of having found an excuse. "It was you, was it not?" Samuel could lie. Could deny. But lies cost dearly when exposed. And upon his face, everyone already recognized the truth. "Master, I was hungry." The blow landed so swiftly Samuel never saw it coming. Only felt the burst of fire across his cheek, the salt of blood flooding his mouth, the ground rushing up. He crumpled sideways, vision darkening at the edges. "Get up!" Master Thornhill thundered. Samuel rose, legs unsteady, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. "Tomorrow morning," Thornhill proclaimed, loud enough for the whole assembly, "this boy will learn what becomes of thieves. And you will all learn with him." He swept his gaze across the rows of frightened faces. "No one steals from me. Ever." Edward Thornhill was not the most brutal slave master in Mississippi. But he was far from the most merciful. He did not whip for sadistic pleasure, as some Samuel had heard tell. Did not brand with hot iron. Did not separate infants from mothers purely out of cruelty. Yet Thornhill possessed vanity. And his vanity fed upon control. He had inherited the plantation from his father, along with the debts, and the reputation for being soft on the Negroes. In his early years, he had attempted to be different. Reasonable, even. But his neighbors had mocked him. They said he would lose everything without a firm hand. They said slaves respected only fear. So Thornhill had learned to perform punishment as theater. It was not about the offense itself. It was about the spectacle. About etching each correction into collective memory so that none would dare repeat it. A stolen egg offered the ideal stage. That night, Samuel did not sleep. He lay on the cabin floor, listening to the worried murmurs around him. Women wept softly. Aunt Ruth, who always held words of comfort, came and took his thin hand in hers. "It will hurt," she said quietly. "But you will bear it. Bite your tongue. Do not scream. Do not grant him that." Samuel nodded, yet inside he was hollow. It was not dread of pain that wounded deepest. It was the injustice. Knowing that a lifetime of hunger, of labor, of obedience, meant nothing. One egg, an egg he had not even fully savored, and all of it ended in blood. The bell sounded before sunrise. Everyone was roused. Public punishments always took place early, before the day's work commenced. They served as reminders to carry through the hours. But this time was different. "Not here," Overseer Sullivan announced. "Master wants it in the woods. Bring the boy." Confusion rippled through the enslaved. Punishments were always conducted in the yard, before all eyes. Never in the forest. Why the forest? Aunt Ruth pressed Samuel's hand. "Maybe it is better," she whispered. "At least the children will not see." But Samuel understood it was not kindness. It was something else. He simply did not yet know what. Master Thornhill appeared, mounted on his horse, a tall, well-fed bay. He carried the whip in his right hand, not the overseer's common lash, but his personal instrument, braided leather tipped with metal. "Let us proceed," he said. Two overseers seized Samuel's arms and propelled him forward. He walked on trembling legs, bare feet pressing the cold ground, along the path he knew intimately, the trail to the forest, to his refuge, to the place where his only friend dwelt. And suddenly Samuel understood. This was not to shield the children. It was to carry him somewhere his cries would reach no ears. Somewhere no one could intervene, even if they wished. The forest that had been his sanctuary would now become his place of torment. They walked a quarter hour. Past the area where Samuel customarily gathered wood. Past the oak. Samuel glanced at the thick roots where the wolf often rested, but nothing stirred there, only leaves and shadow. At length, Master Thornhill halted in a small clearing. Sunlight had not fully reached it. All was dim and cold. "This will serve," he said, dismounting. The overseers dragged Samuel to a stout tree. They forced his arms around the trunk and lashed his wrists together with coarse rope. Samuel faced the bark, back exposed, toes barely grazing the earth. "Remove the shirt," Thornhill ordered. One of the overseers tore away Samuel's ragged garment, laying bare his thin back, ribs visible beneath dark skin. Thornhill gripped the whip, testing its balance. The leather cracked once, merely to intimidate. Samuel squeezed his eyes shut. 20 lashes, Thornhill declared. "So you understand that nothing here is yours. Not an egg, not a crust of bread, not the air you breathe. All of it is mine. You are mine." He raised his arm. And then the forest awakened. The wolf was hunting when it sensed it. Not sound. Not scent. Something deeper. That nameless instinct binding predators to the world around them. Danger. Fear. Familiar. It halted mid-step, a half-eaten mouse abandoned between its paws. Lifting its head, it tested the breeze, and caught it. The boy's scent. But not his ordinary smell, sweat, earth, the stale bread he always carried. This was the scent of terror. Pure, sharp, desperate. The smell that precedes agony or death. The wolf recognized that odor. It had known it before, when its leg was caught in the iron jaws, when metal teeth sheared through flesh and it believed it would die there. And it had known its opposite, the absence of fear, when the boy came. When small, shaking hands released it, though the cost might be terrible. Debts require no words. They are inscribed somewhere more ancient than speech. The wolf began to run. Not driven by hunger. Not by hunting instinct. By something wolves comprehend more deeply than humans, fidelity. The boy had preserved its life when he could have fled. The boy had shared food when he was starving himself. The boy had spoken to it as an equal, not as a lesser being. And now the boy was in peril. The wolf raced through the forest like a wraith. Its frame remained lean but strong, the injured paw, now healed, carried it swiftly. It vaulted roots, dodged underbrush, tracking that scent of fear intensifying with every stride. It reached the edge of a clearing and halted. There was the boy, lashed to a tree, back bared. And behind him, a man, reeking of horse, leather, rage, and that particular brand of savagery the wolf recognized. The man gripped a long implement ending in glinting points. The wolf had encountered such men before. Men who killed not from need, but for diversion. Men who inflicted harm for enjoyment. 2 other men stood nearby, smelling of sweat and a lesser fear, not the fear of suffering, but the fear of those who observe and do not act. The man with the gleaming object lifted his arm. And the wolf decided. It was not a conscious deliberation. It was instinct more fundamental than thought. It was honor. Yes, animals possess honor, even if humans sometimes overlook this. It was a debt being settled. The wolf emerged from the shelter of the trees. Overseer Sullivan was the first to see it. He leaned against a trunk across the clearing, awaiting the spectacle, when something at the edge of his vision made him turn. What he saw arrested him mid-breath. A massive shape was materializing from the forest. No, not a shape. A wolf. The largest wolf Sullivan had ever beheld. The size of a calf, dark fur streaked with gray, muscle shifting beneath the hide, and eyes, God, those yellow eyes, blazing with an intensity that stole Sullivan's breath. "Master," he stammered. Thornhill had his back turned, focused on adjusting his whip for the initial stroke. "Quiet, Sullivan." The growl severed his words like a blade. Not an ordinary growl. A sound from somewhere primordial, antecedent to fences and plantations and chains. A sound reminding every man there that they were, ultimately, only meat. Thornhill rotated slowly. He saw the wolf. The whip sagged in his grasp. "Good Lord," he breathed. The wolf did not charge. It did not attack blindly. It advanced deliberately, step by step, eyes fixed on Thornhill. Each pace carried a message: move aside, or become prey. Shoot! Thornhill shouted, finding his voice. Kill that creature. Overseer Sullivan fumbled his revolver free with shaking hands. He aimed. The report echoed through the forest, scattering birds in panic. The bullet passed too close, tearing bark from a trunk behind the wolf. The wolf did not flinch. Sullivan fired again. Missed again. His hands were too unsteady. Fear too overwhelming. The wolf decided it had waited sufficient time. It charged. Sullivan dropped the gun and fled. The other overseer tried to raise his rifle, but the wolf was swifter. It struck him with its full weight, driving him to the earth like a plaything. The rifle spun away. The men shrieked, attempted to roll, but the wolf planted its paws on his chest and growled so near his face that spittle and hot breath mingled. The men fainted, simply lost consciousness from sheer terror. Thornhill was trying to mount his horse, but the animal had panicked. It reared, kicked, backed away. The wolf turned toward him. Thornhill did the only thing he could, retreated stumbling, caught his heel on a root, fell supine in the dirt. The wolf advanced. It halted inches from the fallen man, teeth bared, a low, ceaseless growl resonating in its throat. Thornhill raised his arms to shield his face, the whip abandoned at his side, useless. Do not kill me," he pleaded. "Please." The wolf could have ended him instantly. One bite to the throat and all would be finished. But it did not kill. Instead, it pivoted and walked directly to the tree where Samuel remained bound. Samuel had heard everything but witnessed nothing. Facing the trunk, he could only register the shots, the cries, the growl that simultaneously chilled him and kindled warmth. Now he perceived footfalls. Not a man's tread. The gait of something large and heavy, approaching him directly. The wolf halted beside Samuel. It sampled the air, scenting the boy, assessing his injury. Then it performed an act that nearly stopped Samuel's heart. The wolf lay down between Samuel and the white men. It placed its body as a bulwark. As a barrier. As a vow. No one would touch this boy without first passing through it. "You came," Samuel whispered, voice breaking. You came to save me." The wolf inclined its head, yellow irises meeting brown. In that look, the answer was unmistakable, always. Because debts are always repaid. 5 minutes passed before Thornhill gathered sufficient courage to move. He crawled away slowly, never taking his eyes from the wolf. He somehow mounted his still trembling horse. He looked at Samuel, at the wolf, at the entire impossible tableau. "This is not finished," he said, his voice shaking. "I will return with men. With dogs. I will kill that beast." The wolf growled once more, final. Thornhill spurred his horse and fled into the forest, the overseers stumbling behind him. When the hoofbeats faded, the wolf rose. It approached the ropes binding Samuel. With its teeth, it began to gnaw. Time passed, but at last the cord gave way. Samuel dropped to his knees, legs useless. He turned and for the first time faced the wolf without a tree between them. The animal was even larger at close range, formidable, majestic, terrible. "Thank you," Samuel said, and finally the tears came. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." The wolf drew near. For the first time, it pressed its muzzle to the boy's forehead. A brief contact. Gentle. Conveying more than any language could hold. Then it turned and slipped back into the trees. Samuel remained alone in the clearing as the sun at last broke through the canopy. Free. Alive. And knowing he possessed a friend who would cross any boundary to protect him. Samuel did not return to the plantation that day. He understood it would be madness. Thornhill would come back with guns, hounds, armed men. They would slaughter the wolf and likely kill Samuel as well, for witchcraft, or whatever charge they fabricated. So he ran deeper into the woods, to places he had never ventured. The wolf appeared intermittently, always at a distance, guiding, indicating paths, as if it understood that now was the time for concealment. That night, Samuel slept curled in a hollow between the immense roots of an ancient oak. He was cold, famished, frightened. Yet he also carried something new, hope. The forest was not a prison. It was liberation, if he learned its laws. In the morning, he woke to distant clamor, barking, shouts, Thornhill's tracking dogs following his scent. Samuel rose, ready to flee farther. But the wolf appeared before him. It looked at Samuel, then toward the sound of the baying, and turned, advancing directly toward the noise. "No!" Samuel cried, barely audible. "They will kill you." The wolf glanced back once. Determination filled those yellow eyes. There was farewell. Then it vanished among the trees. The barking intensified. Then came shouts, gunfire, turmoil. Samuel heard everything from afar, hands pressed to his ears, praying, begging. The noise continued a long while, hours, perhaps, or minutes stretched into infinity. When at last silence settled, Samuel waited. He waited through the following morning, the next day, an entire week. The wolf never returned. On a mist-shrouded morning, Samuel finally departed the forest. He did not go back to Thornhill Plantation. Instead, he followed the road, limping, starving, until he reached a small town where secret abolitionists concealed him. Months passed, but eventually they managed to transport him north, to freedom. Yet Samuel never forgot. Years later, when the Civil War erupted and he enlisted in the Union Army, he would recount the story to his fellow black soldiers. The tale of the wolf that had saved him. Of the friend who had crossed the threshold between wilderness and civilization, bound by a loyalty many found incredible. Some dismissed it as delirium, trauma, legend. But those who had endured slavery understood. They recognized that sometimes, within the profoundest cruelty humans can devise, impossible alliances take root. Friendships that surpass species, complexion, shackles. The story circulated. It returned to Mississippi, passed from mouth to mouth among the enslaved. It transformed, grew, gathered embellishments. Some claimed the wolf was an ancestral spirit. Others, a disguised angel. Still others maintained it was simply a wolf, and that was miracle enough. On Thornhill Plantation, Edward never again conducted whippings in the forest. He was afraid. The enslaved perceived this fear and treasured it as a small triumph. For the first time, the master had something besides them to dread. And on moonless nights, when the cold wind swept from the timber, occasionally a long, solitary howl drifted from the trees. Children would ask what it was. The elders would answer with a faint smile at the corners of their mouths. "That is the slave boy's wolf," they would say. Still guarding the forest. Still reminding us that even in the deepest darkness, even in the most profound suffering, something remains that will not bow. There is friendship that neither whip nor chain can sever. There is dignity that no master can confiscate. And one day, they would continue, eyes lifted to the stars, one day we will be free, like that wolf. And when that day comes, we will remember everyone who helped us reach it. Even those with 4 legs and yellow eyes. The story of the wolf and the boy became legend. Became a song murmured in quarters. Became hope when no other hope remained. And in every version, one truth persisted: the egg was merely the catalyst. What truly terrified Mississippi was discovering that even an enslaved child, deemed less than human, could possess an ally subject to no master. Could possess dignity. Could possess a friend willing to cross any boundary to defend him. And that, more than any insurrection or escape, was the most dangerous revelation for a system constructed upon the falsehood that some humans are worth less than others. Because if a starving boy could find a friend in the forest, if a wolf could perceive humanity where masters saw only property, then the entire edifice of slavery rested upon a lie. And lies, however formidable, inevitably crumble when confronted with simple truth. Every person deserves dignity. Every person deserves kindness. Every person deserves someone who will cross any line to protect them. Even a slave boy. Even a wounded wolf.